So this is a general discussion ramble thing about my thoughts on the War Doctor character in Doctor Who. I find him a pretty interesting character, but there's a sort of a clash. So I think should the Eighth Doctor have appeared as the Doctor in the Time War? Should he have appeared in Day of the Doctor? Should he have been the Doctor who did the war? And I think the explanation as to why they created the War Doctor was because the Eighth Doctor, for a more casual audience member, would be too jarring to go from the TV movie until to watch Day of the Doctor and think, why has he gone from a really nice sort of softly spoken Shakespearean kind of person to a gritty war kind of guy? And I think they felt they had to create a new character. On the flip side of that, there's the whole argument that the Doctor in the Time War should have been the Ninth Doctor, but that was initially actually what Moffat was planning. Apparently, he wasn't ever planning the Eighth Doctor to be the Time War Doctor. He was planning for the Ninth Doctor to do that, and that interests me. I don't know how that would have worked if the Ninth Doctor would have been a compelling Doctor or anything like that, as in a compelling Doctor in the Time War. Would it have created any continuity errors? I kind of think if I had to choose War Doctor or Ninth Doctor I would have chosen Ninth, Eighth Doctor, War Doctor, it'd be Eighth. So the War Doctor is the bottom of my ideal situation, but it is part of the Doctor universe, and I do find the War Doctor quite interesting. He's very unique. He is kind of one of those other Doctors, like the Valeyard or the Dream Lord. He's like an other Doctor, but unlike those, the War Doctor is an actual incarnation, and it ruined the numbering. The Ninth Doctor is now the 10th, and the 10th is now the 11th, and the 11th, it just kind of ruins that. But I do find the War Doctor an interesting character, and I think the Eighth Doctor could have worked in the Time War. There's loads of people who consider the War Doctor probably the most controversial of all the Doctors for the fact that Paul McGann was betrayed an opportunity to appear in Day of the Doctor as the actual, Doctor who fought in the Time War. But I remember watching Name of the Doctor and I thought, this is a nostalgic ride. This is exciting. This is brilliant. It's such a buzz of emotion watching that, mainly from the nostalgia. I think now there isn't much of a nostalgic element to the story. It's kind of a decent episode, but at the time, it was so exciting seeing these past Doctors appear doing, interacting. And yes, the green screen was corny, but that didn't matter. And at the end of the episode, you have the War Doctor first appear, and it says, introducing the Doctor, played by John Hurt, or whatever it says. And I remember thinking, this is so exciting, this is so cool, and I didn't even know who he was. I was convinced he was like a Valeyard kind of character. The Valeyard is a manifestation of the dark aspects of the Doctor's personality between his 12th and 13th incarnations, and he appeared in the 1986 series called The Trial of the Time Lord, and he was played by Michael Jaston, and I thought he was just another sort of type of Valeyard, but he wasn't, clearly. He was actually a legitimate, real incarnation of the Doctor, and I think the Eighth Doctor, it's interesting. There is Eighth Doctor Time War stuff. There's Big Finish stuff where they've done a few box sets of not just the Eighth Doctor generally, but they've now moved on to the Eighth Doctor during the Time War, before he turned into the War Doctor. Now, I haven't listened to them, but generally in the TV series in Night of the Doctor, it's basically suggested that the Eighth Doctor is kind of not really that involved in the war. He wants to avoid it, and then with the War Doctor, he's like, right, let's go for it. I think what I struggle with the War Doctor most is that in the Day of the Doctor, he's quite a nice person. He's like a nice old man. I would have preferred some more bitterness in the script, which John Hurt would have easily been able to give along in this, in his acting. So it's a bit of a clash, really. I like the War Doctor, but I think his inclusion's a bit. It's very interesting, but it definitely confuses people who are trying to get into Doctor Who. They say, oh, there's 13 Doctors. Well, not really, because there's this War Doctor. Oh, so there's 14 Doctors. Well, the War Doctor wasn't really called the Doctor. He didn't really give himself a name. Oh, so there's 13 Doctors. Well, not really, because the War Doctor is an incarnation, but he's an incarnation who didn't call himself the Doctor, so there's been and it's just so confusing, and it's really, really irritating. And I suppose it moves on to the whole Time War. The Time War for me was wrapped up in a neat little bow in The End of Time, and that felt like to me that the Time War story was done. You didn't need to touch it. And in a lot of the Matt Smith era, they don't really touch the Time War that much. There's a few fleeting references here and there, but up until Day of the Doctor, there aren't that many, really. Not really that many references. And then you get to Day of the Doctor, or Name of the Doctor, really, and you get a lot more, and it kind of it's a bit irritating because actually, if you look at the End of Time, with all its story problems, I don't think it's that good at the End of Time. I think it's ridiculously over the top, and that's really a different video. But that episode wrapped up the Time War for me. And then you think Day of the Doctor wraps up the Time War, but then they keep bringing it up occasionally in the 12th Doctor era. And I think finally we're at a stage where it's done. I think Day of the Doctor itself is quite a good episode, but it could have been very, very different. I think had the War Doctor just been the Eighth Doctor, I think it would it have been better. And that's the thing. The War Doctor is a really odd character for me. He's really peculiar because, on one hand, he was created because they didn't want a clash between the Eighth Doctor you see in the TV movie and a potential bitter, horrible Eighth Doctor you see. They didn't want to tarnish the Eighth Doctor character. And Eccleston obviously wasn't going to come back as the Ninth Doctor, so they thought, let's just create a new incarnation. And, I like the War Doctor. I liked him in Day of the Doctor. I've read Engines of War, a War Doctor book, and the War Doctor is brilliantly written there. And I even listened to Only the Monstrous, the War Doctor Big Finish box set, and that was really good, quite good at least. They got the character spot on. I just think a lot of people would have preferred to have the Eighth Doctor as the Doctor in the Time War. And they are doing Big Finish box sets where it's the Time War, but it's the Eighth Doctor before he turns into the War Doctor. It's probably one of the most controversial creative decisions in the history of Doctor Who. He's a funny Doctor, the War Doctor. And I like his outfit being like an amalgamation, like a kind of a cobbled together. It has like a really tatty, really worn down leather jacket. And I like the fact maybe he regenerated into the Ninth Doctor and thought he couldn't move on from the Time War yet because he hadn't met Rose. So he just puts on like a cleaner version of that same jacket. If you look at the War Doctor, he's actually kind of, his costume's like a weird mix between the Eighth Doctor and the Ninth Doctor. So it's a weird incarnation of the War Doctor. I think it's now been over 5 years since Day of the Doctor, and coming up to 6 years since his first appearance, which was in May 2013, Name of the Doctor. And I think people have kind of moved on from that period a little bit, and people have kind of forgotten about the War Doctor. And I just wanted to give my thoughts on the character. John Hurt gives a great performance, and I really like the fact that he came back to do 3 Big Finish box sets before he passed away. And it's fine. I do think the people who don't like the War Doctor the most are people who are big Eighth Doctor fans and maybe some big Ninth Doctor fans. Although I'm kind of inclined to believe that if you're a Ninth Doctor fan, you've kind of accepted that Eccleston's never going to come back to Doctor Who, or even Big Finish. I mean, Eric Roberts, who appeared in the 1996 TV movie, has come back to do some Big Finish as the Master. So I don't think, is Eccleston ever going to come back? That is a different video by itself. The War Doctor, it kind of ruins the flow for me. The whole point of the War Doctor to me is that he's really different from the other Doctors. He's kind of a very, sort of worn down Doctor. He's very tired. And if you actually think about it, at the end of the Night of the Doctor, his first chronological appearance, they use an image of John Hurt from, I think a promo picture from Alien or something. Basically, the War Doctor looks quite young, and by the time you meet him in Day of the Doctor, or Name of the Doctor, but properly Day of the Doctor, he's all old. He's got white hair. Now, Time Lords, we don't know how they age, but it's basically implied that the War Doctor's been the War Doctor for a ridiculously long time, and because it's a Time War, it's probably very difficult to measure how old the War Doctor was, and he obviously croaked it because of old age, and then obviously turned to the Ninth Doctor. I think the War Doctor is, there's this TV series that could have been in the 1990s, maybe like sort of the mid to late 90s, sort of maybe it would have started in 1997 and concluded in 2005. I don't know, and that's like a secret to John Hurt series where John Hurt, would have been the Doctor at that point, and it would have been some gritty, dark Time War series. But the Time War itself is a very weird concept. I kind of think they should have left some of it alone because it's such a monster of a concept that you can't do it justice just on television. Maybe it's better in audio because you can imagine some of it yourself, and I have listened to some War Doctor stuff, so I can picture some of it without having to, I can picture some of it subjectively. But I think the time will maybe, in the TV series at least, they should just leave it alone. I'm thankful that in Series 11 they didn't reference it, I think, at all, and they haven't referenced the Time War for a long time. They got a bit heavy on the references in the Capaldi years, and I kind of think people want new ideas. And the Time War is a good way of separating the new series from the classic series, and the Eighth and the War Doctors are kind of the bridge between that. The Night of the Doctor was really exciting, seeing Paul McGann come back physically in the role, filmed for the first time, I think, about 17 years, whatever it was at the time, 16, 17 years. And, it's for 7 minutes, and it's great, but he regenerates into the War Doctor. But I think they were never going to go for the Eighth Doctor, and the Ninth Doctor is never going to happen, because obviously Eccleston was never going to say yes, because that's just the sort of actor he is. I like the War Doctor. I think he's very underrated, but I don't rank him alongside the others, because the other Doctors had their own series, they had their own companions. The War Doctor was just a guest Doctor. He's not really like a main meaty Doctor, but paradoxically he kind of is, because he's an actual incarnation. He's not like the Valeyard or the Dream Lord or anything else. It's not even like John Hurt is playing an incarnation once played by another actor, like David Bradley being the first Doctor or anything like that. So I just wanted to give my my general thoughts about the War Doctor that I've been kind of having for the best part of 5-6 years, and I thought just now, spur of the moment, I would do this video about the War Doctor. A very interesting addition to the Doctor Who sort of canon, and he hasn't really been touched upon much. Since John Hurt passed away. There was a box set in February 2017, the last Big Finish War Doctor box set, but there haven't been any, books or comics, I don't think, with that character. So maybe there'll be some resurrection of the War Doctor in future, so maybe. If you liked this video and you are interested in what else I do, why not check out my other videos that I've made so far? And if you're really interested, why not click subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a video.